In World War I and World War II, the standard issue bolt-action rifle of the Royal and Commonwealth Armies, the Lee-Enfield Mark I through IV, was notorious for being faster at cycling than other bolt-action rifles at the time. One of the reasons why this was because the bolt had to only rotate 60 degrees, whereas typical Mausers and Mosin Nagants at the time had to rotate 90 degrees. Let's see it in action. Welcome to Random Military History. In World War II, the standard grenade for the US military was the Mark II Pineapple, designed by John Browning, and although the grenade was good enough for its time, grenades have come a long way since World War II. The Mark II only had 800 grains of TNT explosive filler. By comparison, the standard infantry grenade used in the US military from 1968 till today, the M67 grenade, has 2,800 grains of TNT filler, over 3 times as much. Let's see it in action. Rewind to the golden age of sail from 1700 to 1840. A typical double-decked, square-rigged, triple-masted ship was called a frigate. The 3 masts were called the foremast, the mainmast, and the mizzenmast. And a typical square-rigged, double-masted ship was called a brig, with only a foremast and a mainmast. Sticking to the topic of the age of sail, there were 2 main types of sail design: square rigging and triangular rigging. Square rigging was highly efficient relative to its surface area, but typically only functioned when at least 120 to 90 degrees or less downwind. Downwind meaning facing the direction the wind is going. Whereas triangular rigging was less efficient running downwind, it was much more flexible, able to function in any direction, even directly upwind, as it transferred its wind energy to pull the vessel along, whilst a square sail directly pushes the vessel along. Fast forward back to the present, the F-16 Fighting Falcon, adopted into service in 1978 by Lockheed Martin and General Dynamics, is still the most common multi-role air superiority fighter in the US Air Force, 42 years later. With over 4,600 built, its performance and technology is still good enough for it to be perfectly adequate for the roles it needs to fill, whilst only costing $29 million in today's money, which, although seems like a lot of money, and it is, it's still only a third of the price of a modern F-35 Lightning at around about $100 million. Sticking to the present, the F-16 Fighting Falcon also has 130 kilonewtons of thrust with the afterburner switched on. Just to give you an idea of how much that is, that's a whopping 15 times the thrust of an ME-262 from 1942 at just 8.8 kilonewtons of thrust. It is also 72% or 380 miles per hour faster than the ME-262 with a maximum speed of 920 miles per hour versus the ME-262's 540 miles per hour. Let's see it in action. Pre-reconnaissance ages of the sword and spear, armor often thought to be common and practical as portrayed in movies such as leather armor was actually quite rare and impractical, because soft leather offers virtually no protection. You have to harden it by boiling it before it can, which makes it stiff and inflexible. It's difficult to repair as you have to stitch it up when it breaks, as well as, most importantly and most in contrast to common belief, it was expensive rather than cheap, as you can only get so much out of one cow, which takes 8 to 10 years to grow, and when cows were farmed for leather, it was often reserved for making shoes rather than armor. Sticking to the pre-reconnaissance age of the sword and spear, you may be asking, well, if leather wasn't used, then what was used? The real most common and arguably most effective form of armor was a linen-based fabric called gambeson. Gambeson was thick and soft, able to absorb blows from weapons, both cutting and bludgeoning. Its advantages were that it was cheap, as it was harvested from flax bushes, which can easily be rapidly grown, was very malleable, as linen can be stitched into any shape and thickness, and was very flexible as it was soft and molded around the body, even in joint areas. Thick layers of gambeson were able to resist most swords, knives and arrows, but were more vulnerable against weapons with more armor penetration, like axes, warhammers and spears. Thank you very much for watching. That's it for this video. There's going to be a new one coming soon. I hope to turn this into a major series. Anyway, see you next time.